guys, it's Chantel from Wildberry Quilting. So today we're going to be adding a label to a quilt, and it's going to be the quilt that I made for my son, and I'm going to use some of the leftover fabrics from the quilt top in order to do so. So let's get started. I can't wait to show you. So we're going to make a quilt label to go on the back of this quilt that we did the other day. This is the quilt that I showed you the free motion quilting on. You should be able to see some of how that turned out here. And this is the back of our quilt. Now, this quilt just needs to have a tag added to it, and it'll be complete. So, I have picked out a couple of fabrics that I think will look nice to use. I will be using one of my tags from the Sweetwater Label Company. And let me just show you how I go about doing that. And I will say that this is a little bit more involved than just sewing the tag on simply, just because I like to have a little bit more, I don't know, I think it looks a little bit nicer if we put just a little bit more work into it, and it really doesn't take that much more effort. Hopefully I'm in screen of everything. So I'm just making sure that I have a 1/4 of an inch on all sides away from the print of my tag. So that's what I'm doing right here. And it just looks nice if it's the same amount all the way around. We can just line up one side and then line up our 1/4 of an inch across there. And now it's all ready to go. Now, I'm planning to use these two fabrics along with my quilt, or along with my tag. And kind of have to decide, I have to decide what corner I want it in, which I'll probably do it in the bottom corner, but I'm just going to show you, this is my background fabric. I want these to stack. So what I will be doing is kind of laying it out like this and giving myself an idea how that will look on the quilt itself. So I don't particularly like this order because I feel like this is dark and this is dark and it blends into it. So I will switch that around and see if I like that a little bit more. This is just very rough. It doesn't have to be. We're going to cut it down to size in a moment. And I think that looks pretty good. I think that'll contrast nicely while still using fabrics from the quilt. So first thing that we're going to do is just give this a nice press so that it lays nice and flat when we go to attach our tag. And probably right about there. And give myself plenty of room to work around it on all sides, maybe even tap it over a little bit. And that should be good. And these tags are made to where you can just iron them right on, and it's super easy. So that's that. Now we'll take this back over and trim it. Okay, so we're back over here, ready to trim. Now I have to decide how much space I want to show on the outside of this, how much of this fabric I want to show. I like to leave a smaller width on this and then a little bit larger width on the fabric that I'm going to be using underneath. But I still like it to be noticeable. So I'm going to say maybe half an inch around would probably look good for me, which means I need to have an extra 1/4 inch to tuck under, which means I need 3/4 of an inch on all sides. And I'm just lining up that edge. And going around. And again, it's just the edge. I'm lining up the 3/4 inch line with the edge of the tag. And then the line along the edge here. And it's a little bit too far to be an even area here, but that's okay. You see, looks very nice. I've got it going all the way around evenly. And next, we're going to be figuring out how much we want of this. It looks like I may actually end up with a narrower piece around the outside of this, and I'm okay with that. I just like to have it staggered a little bit to where one is wider and then one is narrower. So looks like might need to cut another piece of fabric, but I don't think so. I think if I put it right here, I'd probably be good, because I'll probably do a 1/4 inch showing on this orange, and which means I will cut it a half an inch larger on all sides. So what I will do now is I'll take this over to my iron, and I'm just going to iron it down a 1/4 of an inch on all sides. I'm going to do that off camera, and then I'll be back in a moment to show you how we're going to trim this one down. Okay, so here we are at the sewing machine and ready to stitch this on. Now, I did not end up putting any pins in this. Let's go ahead and pull out the pin cushion and get a couple stuck in here before I get to sewing, because we don't need to have any issues. I'm just gonna, I don't really want to poke it through my tag, so I'm gonna poke it around. And you don't really need a whole lot of pins here, just maybe one in each corner. Not even each corner, just enough to keep it from floating around on you. I think I'll probably do one more and I'll be happy with that. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is stitch this on just as I said, and then I'll go ahead and do the rest. Now I'm just going to stitch probably about 1/8 of an inch from the edge all the way around. I kind of went a little bit over there, but that's okay. Such a small amount, nobody's going to notice. Oops. Went further than I really wanted to go, so I'm just going to go back one. And I actually have already met my stitches here, but I just want to go over a little bit more just to make sure nothing comes undone. And I can cut my stitches. Now, even though I haven't tacked down the seam allowance, it's all fairly stable because I did iron it, and I also have it tacked down here now. So now I can go probably about 1/8 of an inch again around the outside, which is exactly what I'm going to do. Now, actually, I don't want to start up in the corner like this, because if you start in the corner, you are much more likely to end up with a bubble when you meet. If you meet on a straightaway, you can ease in any extra fabric that you have there. You can't really ease in extra fabric that easily when you are meeting a straight line. When you have two perpendicular lines coming together. So I am going to start probably right around here. That'll give me plenty of room to ease in any extra fabric. I don't think there will be any, but that'll just ensure that there is not an issue. It's much better to plan ahead than to have to go back and fix it later or to struggle with it. So we're just gonna eliminate that issue before it's even an issue. And just tucking in these little pokey corners that might want to pop out. He still kind of popped out a little bit. Let's see. I don't really have a stiletto, so try and make do with something else, but maybe that's something I should get at some point. There we go. I think that took care of it. Okay. And as you see, I come along here, and there's absolutely no bubble there where I'm about to meet. Just going to reverse a couple stitches and then trim. There we go. And snip our little extra threads. Ah, that thread got caught in a seam, didn't it? Not a seam, just, there we go. So, looks like I still had him peek out a tiny bit, but nobody's going to notice that. Now we get to go back over to the table and trim around here, 1/2 inch on all sides. Okay guys, I'm back, and I've gone ahead and trimmed this up and folded under the edges. One thing that I did differently than what I'd showed you before is I actually left a 1/2 inch of seam allowance for this one. I thought I would just do that to show you that that is okay, it will work. And in some situations where you have a particularly stubborn fabric, maybe something that's a little bit more bulky that you're working with to layer your tag, you might actually prefer and find it easier to leave a 1/2 inch of seam allowance instead of a 1/4 inch. It can sometimes make it easier to keep that edge underneath when you are stitching it. You also then have the option that you can sew further in on your tag. So you still don't want to sew too far in from the edges because you want to be able to catch these, but your corners and everything. But it can make it to where you could sew maybe a 1/4 inch in instead of an 1/8 of an inch. So I've got my quilt, my son's quilt rather. I'm going to just kind of figure out where I want to put this. And I am definitely somebody who just eyeballs things. I don't sit here and measure all of this out. I also don't measure out when I'm ironing under my seam allowance. I just do that by eye. So, same thing that I showed you before. You want to start in the middle of the tag, not at a corner, because you're more likely to run into issues when you meet two perpendicular lines together. So that looks pretty good to me, I think. Yep. Make sure it's looking good along the edge here. I just am checking the width from each side of the tag. And I am going to start right here in the middle bottom, right there. And I'm going to do it a 1/4 of an inch in, just to show you that that's an option. And also so that my white stitches don't show up as noticeably against this orange, which I could just change my thread to orange, but then you might not be able to see quite as well. And also I'm feeling kind of lazy right now, so I don't think I'm going to do that. And I'm just kind of twisting the quilt up here on my lap, and it's not that big of a deal. Now I do want to try a little bit harder to get these corners tucked up underneath, since I'm going a 1/4 of an inch. That way it's more likely to catch that and keep it from peeking out. All right. And so now we've got all of the bulk of the quilt right up here. Hopefully it's not going to mess with the focus on the camera too much. Yeah, I think that's okay. And if you're worried about it, you can always pin this in place too. I'm not so concerned about it. I feel like it's gonna hold together pretty decently for me. Now, instead of pushing all of my quilt through the throat space in order to get this edge, I'm actually going to completely turn my quilt around the other way. So I'm going around my machine instead of through it. Same effect, it just makes it a little bit easier on me, and I'm not sitting there trying to fight my machine in order to get to the next side. There we go. And our final edge here. and you just want to overlap your stitches some so that they can be more secure, both at the beginning and the end. And I've got my tag on there. Just going to trim everything up. Now you might be wondering how this looks on the front of the quilt. That's a valid question, because I did do all of that quilting on the front. So how's it going to look up there? Well, if you remember correctly, my quilting was very free-handed and organic feeling, and this is very much a square box that I've just added. Now it's only one row of stitching since I took this in layers and I sewed most of it together, not being on here. The only area that I sewed on to the quilt itself was this one, and you can see this is fairly secure on here. But if you're worried about having just that little bit of fabric here, then you do want to get an 1/8 of an inch up. This isn't going to bother me. If anything, my son will probably have fun just picking at it and flipping it when he's supposed to be going to bed. So this is what it looks like on the front. There is a box there. Are you going to notice that? You know, maybe if you go looking for it, but with all of the piecing of the quilt, it just kind of blends in, especially once this quilt is washed. You won't notice this because you'll get that beautiful bubbly puckering effect that happens when you wash a quilt, where everything shrinks just a tiny. Okay guys, we're done with that quilt and adding the label to it, and I think it came out absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much for coming along and sharing this journey and crafting with me, and I hope you'll come back and enjoy some more time with me in the future. Please like and subscribe if you like my videos. All right, hope to see you again soon. Bye.